The greatest weapon that's being used against the Muslims today is wealth. And what's crazy is that Muslims have been brainwashed by their own people to believe that wealth is actually bad. So that the greatest weapon that's being used against us, we actually don't even realize that it's a weapon that we should also try to acquire then to defend ourselves with. In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into how that wealth is used against Muslims and why you need to stop trying to earn 6 figures a month, but rather you need to acquire billions and billions in wealth as a slave of Allah who cares for the akhirah. My purpose and my mission is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by serving His religion. With that said, let's begin. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Stop chasing money, but chase wealth. What's the difference? Money is a medium of exchange. It comes and it goes, but wealth is that which you own. It's that which remains. For example, in my hand right now, I have my card. Now, of course, it's not a credit card. There's no riba here, alhamdulillah, but I have my card and in it, I have what I own. I have an asset that's inside of this card that I own. It's money, that's wealth that I own, right? Alhamdulillah. But let's zoom out a bit from what's in my hand. Look at where I am. I'm inside of an apartment. This apartment is wealth that belongs to my landlord. Now, what you have to understand is that the person who owns something that's more valuable than you, he has more wealth than you. So I own some wealth, alhamdulillah, but my landlord who owns this apartment and perhaps multiple apartments is wealthier than me because he owns things that are more valuable than me. Now, why is this wealth important? I'm going to get to that inshallah ta'ala, but please bear with me until the end. But let's zoom out of the apartment that my landlord owns. This apartment is in a building. It's a 21-story building. On each floor, there are, 20 plus apartments. There is easily over 50 apartments inside of this building. Can you imagine how wealthy the guy who owns this building is in comparison to my one landlord who owns this one apartment? He's obviously wealthier because he has that which is more valuable. Now let's zoom out onto the street. And on this street are many apartment buildings. There's a guy who owns the street, There's a guy who owned the street and sold the land to those that wanted to build these apartment buildings. The guy who owns the street is wealthier. Let's move a bit further out from this street and look at this area, this locality, this section, this community. This is a greater piece of land upon which there are multiple businesses and multiple buildings. There are skyscrapers, there are malls, there are restaurants, there are streets with walks, there are museums, there are all of these things. Guess what? The guy who owns that is wealthier than the guy who owns one street. And then we zoom out, there's a city, and the city has stuff that's owned by someone who's even wealthier, and then there are countries and so on and so forth. And then what you don't realize is that, okay, this land, these buildings are crazy wealthy, right? This is like hundreds of millions, like these buildings are worth. But what about the activity that goes on inside these buildings? The activity that goes on inside of these buildings is even more valuable. It's even more valuable, right? We all know how expensive it is to purchase land or a property, a commercial property in Westminster, in London, like Oxford Street, and Manhattan in New York, but it's nowhere near as valuable as a business that operates in those areas. The amount of money that comes out of those areas, that's a different level of money. That's a different level of money. And then that doesn't even account for digital real estate, which is having websites, right? Like Google. Do you know how much money these guys make? Like Google owns so much digital real estate. It owns your email inboxes. It owns the tools you use to create your spreadsheets. It owns the search engines on which you search. It owns YouTube. And then what does it own on the back? It owns data, and it uses that data for so much more. Like what I'm trying to show you guys here, this wealth is so much more than you just trying to earn 6 figures a month or 7 figures a month. Wealth. There are so many opportunities, and there are people that are so much more wealthier than you. Now, I want you to start looking at wealth as something that you're actually trying to acquire. But you might turn back and say, Prophet Imran, but I'm not really interested in billions of dollars in terms of land or property or digital real estate or businesses or data. I'm not interested in any of that. I just want to get by. And here's why you should be interested. And here's why I am interested. It's because that wealth brings about power. It's not about indulging in opulence and spending money to satisfy your desires. There isn't any sane person I know on earth that can spend $100 million on satisfying his desires. How many Bugattis can you buy? How many private jets can you buy? How many mansions can you buy? How many designer clothes and outfits can you buy before you've exhausted all of it? And you will still have tens and millions of dollars left over. So that begs the question, isn't it? Before we get to why you should try to acquire that type of wealth, it begs the question, why is it that we have people that are trying to become billionaires? And then why is it we have people who are billionaires that are trying to become what? Multi-billionaires. Why is it that we've got people like Warren Buffett and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk that after having passed $100 billion are still trying to earn more and are still going up that value ladder in terms of wealth? It's because with wealth comes power. With wealth comes power, and then that power can be used as a weapon. It can be used as a weapon for good and bad. It can be used as a weapon to attack and defend. And this is something that, my brothers, we did not realize. But our Salaf al-Salih, our righteous, pious predecessors realized, such as Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala, who said that al-mal huwa silah, that wealth is a weapon. We use it to defend ourselves and to protect ourselves. And there are people on earth, there are groups on earth of people that belong to certain religious organizations and ideologies, who I need not mention, but we all know who I'm talking about, that have got so much wealth that they can fund the majority of the politicians in Congress in America. And they can fund almost half of the MPs in the House of Parliament in the UK. They can literally fund the Prime Minister of the UK. They can literally fund the media institutions that are spreading the messages that they want them to spread. They can literally fund educational institutes that are going to push certain narratives for the hundreds of thousands of students that are every single year going into those education institutions and then coming out, supporting them and their ideologies. They can literally fund research papers to be able to come to conclusions that are favorable towards their ideologies and their agendas. They can literally fund influencers on social media, online, to spread certain propaganda and certain messages, and so on and so forth. They can literally fund think tanks to research and investigate and publish knowledge that's in line with their agenda to help change the narrative. Because they have that type of money. You should really not be confused. Elon Musk, this guy, and I really don't like him for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. He's an enemy of Islam. But this guy knows what he's doing. What on earth does the guy who made PayPal have to do with Twitter? He made electric cars. All right, nice piece of technology. But why did you want to buy Twitter? He knew the move he was making. He wants influence. He wants power. He wants to spread certain messages. He wants to spread certain messages. And by the way, we all know, because with this whole thing that happened recently with Gaza, Elon Musk exposed him, and he exposed himself as what? As a lapdog for other people that no matter how wealthy he is, are wealthier than him. And by the way, there may not be individuals that are wealthier than Elon Musk, but there are institutions and collectives of individuals that when they come together, they dwarf the wealth of Elon Musk. The same way when the Sahaba came together and their wealth after the Prophet ﷺ passed away dwarfed the wealth of those that were other than them. They died with billions in terms of estate when they left behind when they passed away. Look at Zubayr ibn Awam, look at Imran ibn Auf, look at these Sahaba, how much they left behind. It is mind-blowing. Billions today in terms of value, in terms of purchasing power, what they left behind. They used that wealth for what? For opulence, for indulgence? Like one more thing, why did Abdurrahman ibn Auf earn so much wealth? Why did Zubayr ibn Awam have so much land? And why did Talha ibn Ubaydillah have so much land? Why? They were Sahaba, they were pious, they were zuhad. They live for the next life, not this life. But with that wealth comes power, comes influence, because you can dictate what happens on that land that you own. You can dictate the way that a business is going to transact, the type of people it's going to hire, and then you can use the value of that as leverage to be able to what? Push and pull certain things in the world. And this is something that the disbelievers have been doing for centuries. And it's literally what they did to oppress the Muslims, to brainwash the Muslims, and to subjugate the Muslims. But Allah Azza wa Jal is with His slaves, which is why they haven't been able to destroy Islam. And despite what they try, Islam is still on the uprise. And we can still see the fruits of Islam everywhere. And the voice of Islam is so loud and clear. Can you imagine how much more of a service it would be to the Ummah if those voices, which are still so pure and so loud and so impactful, had a weapon like wealth behind them? And that is why I think it's appropriate for the slaves of Allah who live for the Akhirah, who value the people of knowledge, who humble themselves and cry before His Lord in the night, who recite the Quran and it is the life of their hearts, who keep the family ties, who give in charity, who fast in Ramadan, who seek knowledge and learn Tawheed and Sunnah. It is appropriate for these people to acquire massive amounts of wealth. And whereas the task of earning and having 100 billion might seem massive and out of your reach, but if we come together as a collective, even if we only have 0.5% of that, or 0.05% of that, but there's 1,000 of us or 10,000 of us that come together. Forgive me if my maths is not adding up. I'm just off the top of my dome right now without having done these calculations prior. But if we come together, we can easily have that type of weight and power and influence with the permission of Allah Azza wa Jalla. The issue here is what? Is that we are divided. We're divided in terms of our creed, our aqidah. We're divided in terms of tribal issues. We're divided in terms of nationalism. We're divided in terms of personal desires. And it's terrible. But what we need to do is we need to come together. We need to worship Allah. That must be the foundation. And then we need to what? And then we need to build wealth. And I just want to send a message out here to all of my brothers online who are entrepreneurs, who are really pushing this entrepreneurial thing in the Muslim space. They're really leveraging like the Muslim element of become, entrepreneur, 7-figure, 6-figure. I just want to be real with you. I can say one thing. Please don't fool yourself, bro. Is leveraging Islam so you can get sales. I'm not going to your heart. You might even have a good intention. It might not be that there's anything bad in your intention, but don't fool yourself into thinking that you're actually going to be serving the deen and helping those who are signing up to your products or your services serve the deen. No. If the foundation is purely just based on let's get money, this foundation is nothing if it's not for Iman. Go to Spain. We always talk about the palaces we left behind in Spain, the architecture we left behind in Spain. Actually, done with the architecture, done with the palaces, done with the way that the masajid were built in such a beautiful way and the way the streets look. You can still see it today. What use is all of that civilization and all of that wealth that we left behind when there's no Iman? In fact, it's due to the weakness of the Iman of the people at that time, as Imam al-Qurtubi references, who was there during the exile, when they were exiled out of Spain. He mentions it's because we became weak in terms of our deen, our religion, and then Allah took this land away from us. So they built all of this wealth, but it was not for an appropriate foundation. How is that there are disbelievers that are more dedicated towards their goal? They know why they're acquiring this wealth. They know why we're trying to become billionaires or 100 billionaires. They want to acquire Twitter because you literally control the narrative now. Look at the access that you have after you acquire something like that. Why don't we have those type of visions? They are more dedicated than us. Do they have the truth? Is the truth with them? Is the truth worth exerting your efforts with them? No. We have the truth that's worth us exerting our efforts. And then we place our trust in Allah. Then we place our trust in Allah. Rather, we place our trust in Allah simultaneously as we exert our efforts. Guys, this is why we set up the righteous remit. People wonder, Imran, why did you stop da'wah? Akhi, I never stopped. I never stopped. I just entered a different level with the permission of Allah Azza wa Jalla. The righteous and rich business. We provide sales and marketing solutions to Muslims. Why? Because sales and marketing is the fundamental activity in your business that will bring in wealth. Bring in cash, which will become wealth. That cash is the bloodline. It's literally the blood. The way that blood is to a body, cash is to a business. And what generates that cash with the permission of Allah is sales and marketing. And that's why we built and hired and recruited and partnered up with the most elite sales and marketing team. People that have served the types of businesses and clients that I've mentioned prior. One of the brothers that works with us, that does our paid ads training and provides those services for our clients and our students, he done digital advertising for a company that has 3 trillion in assets. I got guys like that who've served people, generate that type of wealth to join so they can help Muslims generate that type of wealth. We took them from there and put them here. And that is why, and the motivation, the story behind Righteous and Rich. So get to work. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.